Have you checked the children?
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes that is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Horror Show. I'm Cecil Laird.
And Jaime Fuego is here.
And we are putting this hot on the tail of our Shark Week coverage. Just 2 hours ago, as Fuego and I record this, HBO dropped the very first episode of the hotly anticipated, by some people, Lovecraft Country, which is Jordan Peele-produced. And I say some people because I feel like this is a show that's going to go under the radar for a number of people until it starts to pick up that word of mouth.
Yeah, and I know there's still a lot of people who still have had issues getting their HBO Max over from the original HBO Go or Now or whatever the hell.
It was an automatic transition for me. I mean,
yeah, well, I mean, certain people, I think, with the Roku and also with the Fire Stick, I wasn't able to even download it, so I had to go and use it on my Xbox instead. So, you know, depends on what you're streaming your, Tor or any sort of content on. But yeah, I was curious about it because of the fact that it was dealing with, obviously very timely stuff as far as just, race and, social craziness and everything.
Based on a novel.
Yes, based on a novel of the same name. But also, I mean, the fact that you can have that duality with creatures and craziness in that same regard, too. So, I mean, there was a lot of, just differing things to say in this narrative as far as, like, real-life horrors and of the otherworldly variety. And I was like, double down, hell yeah, even if it may be hard to watch at times.
So we wanted to jump on the pilot as soon as it aired. Usually we try and review the first episode of a new horror series and get around to reviewing the first season once it's complete.
Exactly.
Probably will be the same thing with this one, but since the first episode aired tonight, we were filming for the show anyway. We figured we'd give it a look. And as far as expectations go, I mean, just to talk about our overall thoughts, I wasn't sure what to expect. Obviously, the last trailer that we saw was cool because there was a big Lovecraft part of it.
Yes.
And, like, this show starts off heavy with that. Like, you get a big dose of craziness right at the beginning, and then it kind of explains why you're getting that. And so I was, like, really worried for the first episode that and nothing else was going to live up to that level of craziness.
I was thinking the same thing.
Quite frankly, I was like, oh no, they shot this crazy wad at the beginning of the show, and now they're not going to live up to it for the rest of it. But I will happily say that I was proven wrong by the end of this first episode. And I will also give it the caveat and say that even though this first episode ended up being a lot more action-packed and way more up yours and my alley than we could have anticipated.
Once we got there, yes.
I do feel like that this pace cannot be upheld with the rest of the season. Like, there's no way we're going to get that amount of awesomeness every episode going forward. I think we'll get maybe a little level of it, but there's no way it's going to be as nuts, and they're not going to throw as much at us as they did in this season premiere episode, personally. But because they did so for the season premiere, I was very happy with it. I was actually starting to doze in the middle of it. I was starting to get a little drawn out, but then some of the craziness kicked in, and I was keyed in for the rest of the episode for sure. So what were your thoughts, Fuego?
I really enjoyed it, man, and it really did live up to what I was anticipating with just having, like, nice character development before finally getting into the craziness of said creatures that we've seen in the trailers without really getting into it. It does take its time, but I was anticipating that in a lot of ways. This is a show that, really wanted to focus on real-world horrors and then double down, as I said earlier, in everything else. But I was really especially impressed with the fact that there is obviously, despite the fact that they even mention about the nastiness of Lovecraft himself, and it's something that even Joe Hill, that he changed the name of his town in Lock and Key for his Netflix series because of it. But nonetheless, there is reverence to just genre writing, because that's really the most of what we had at this point. There's references to Dracula, to Ray Bradbury, to, I mean, even nods to Lovecraft, where they're like, hey, he was a horrible person, but he still wrote some good stuff. So I appreciated that, and it was, factoring in a very timely manner what we expected with this show.
Heavy into race relations, because it's set in What was the year? 19.
I was assuming late 50s, early 60s
Yeah.
because of the fact that I believe at one particular point our former war vet, who is our main character, essentially, he's come back from a conflict, but despite his dream sequence that we have at one particular point, this is like pre-Vietnam and post-World War II, so I was thinking Korean War for him, but I wasn't 100%. I don't have all of those details, unfortunately. But
we haven't read the book,
I mean,
obviously.
yeah, exactly. But a very tense time in American history, and cause a wheel, as I say on here all the time. And so these sort of things, they cyclically return. We think we're past this sort of crap, and then we return to it, and without getting too into it. But it was well acted, well done in that regard. And as far as everything in that nature, I was very impressed. It had that sort of balance that I was really hoping for.
So why don't you hit the story then, real quick?
Yeah, story. So, a lover of genre writing, even so much to one that he can put past some of the former Confederate soldier stuff of John Carter. I haven't read any of the John Carter from Mars stuff, but he says that he likes pulp at the very beginning, after there is a tough situation that goes down on a bus where him and this other woman are relegated to the back of it, and then they're walking as opposed to being saved from the breakdown like the rest of the gringos, as I would say here in the Southwest. But nonetheless, he's trying to get back to Chicago because of the fact that his father has gone missing, and both his aunt and uncle don't necessarily know where he's gone. He's been missing for a couple of weeks, and they do even admit at one particular point, well, when he gets on the sauce, we don't necessarily know where he's gone or what has transpired. Didn't pay his rent, and he has one clue, which is in the form of a letter that his father sent him, and he's trying to find what he initially thinks is Arkham, but it turns out it's Artem. It was a D.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, it was a D. So basically, it's a different area of Massachusetts. So he's trying to go from Chicago, in Illinois, through the Midwest and into New England. And I was mistaken. I thought he was trying to get through the South at one particular point when I saw some of the trailers. But no, he's just going through the Midwest, and a lot of these tensions were just as prevalent there. And that's those real life just monsters that they're encountering. And there is a girl who comes along the way, an old childhood friend of his who hasn't seen him in years, and so she just tags along with the uncle, and I'm not sure if it was his father's brother or anyway, it doesn't matter. It's an uncle, it's a friend, and they are going cross country trying to find his dad, and everything along the way of every scary variety. So yeah, it was well crafted in this first episode, but it was a little long in the tooth, as you said. It was over an hour long. A lot of these episodes are like 45 to 50 something minutes. I think this was close to an hour and 15, and so yeah, it was just world building. Even if it was a little long in the tooth, they had a lot of stuff to set up, I think.
Yeah, it got a little slow in the middle there, but it was still intriguing enough. And then, like I said earlier, when the action really kicked in towards the back part of it, then I was wrapped with attention. So story-wise, it was intriguing. It's just really heavy-handed on the dealing with racism portion of the story already in the first episode.
Which is back to the source material too.
I understand, but I just worry it's going to get fatiguing over the course of the entire season. And I understand it's more than fatiguing for an entire race, but I'm just saying, to have the series hinge so heavily on that aspect would be fatiguing for the viewers, I would think. So I hope that that's not going to be the case. But quite honestly, after having watched the preview for like this season on Lovecraft Country, which we saw at the end, it actually looks like it's got flares of Indiana Jones. Like, these three are on this road trip, and they're going to be running into crazy things and tasks and exploration things that they're going to have to go through. Like, they're all balancing on this beam in a cave at one point, it looks like. And so it looks like it's going to be more of an adventure series than I ever thought it was going to be. Again, having never read the book, know.
Indeed.
So,
as far as
acting-wise,
acting, I love the chemistry, especially between our trio that really become our main little quartet. I hate to say it, But
They're kind of like
yeah.
the Preacher crew in my. I mean, not.
I can see those
you know.
similarities too, man. Yeah, yeah.
Obviously
Absolutely.
not as depraved, much more wholesome.
Oh yeah, which and
But
that's
still.
another series that we need to finish reviewing at some particular point. But
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, great dynamic between all of them. The slight little like love tension, you know, between the two old friends and stuff like that. And also, I loved the uncle and just him and his daughter and just her giving him the comic book thing, the little thing that she had drawn, but
Mhm.
then when you turn it over and you see the full extent of it, there's a lot of people that were very critical of Green Book, and this is like the anti-Green Book in a lot of ways as far as safe passage through negative areas. That was more the South and the Midwest, obviously. I loved Mahershala Ali in that movie. It's not horror, obviously, but you know, there were a lot of people critical of that. But we're dealing with similar themes in a similar time. I also loved, even though it's brief, the dynamic between the returning sister and her more successful, seemingly, just, you know, soul awesome, you know, singing sister who, you know, she makes her return, and but you can tell that there's family tension, which becomes even more apparent when they stop off to see a brother at one particular point. Those were very intensely acted scenes and kind of rough, even though we only just overhear some of it along with the uncle and our main character. So, I mean, there's so much complexity in this, whether it's, you know, otherworldly or just real life tensions or just real, even on a smaller scale, family tensions. This show, it's got layers, man. It's got
Already,
layers
yeah.
going so deeply, and even in the looking ahead, we saw that her sister is going to be a big part of the storytelling. We don't know in what dynamic, but she's there, and you know, they both had great voices. I don't know. I love the culmination of so much of this. I do have a little bit of your worry that they're trying to just fit so many different aspects into this, and I'm not sure how much of that was in the source material. I really want to seek it out at this particular point. But Misha Green, I believe, is the showrunner, and you know, Jordan Peele is an EP. I'm very hopeful and intrigued, and you know where they go forward.
So circling back to the acting then.
Oh yeah, well I gave all my creds to the
Okay,
actors,
well yeah,
man.
then you.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then
I wasn't
and then
sure. Okay,
circled
all right.
back,
So
yeah.
I'm gonna circle back to the acting then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the acting is strong throughout, and all of the actors acquit themselves quite well. It's just, it's frustrating to see the past laid before us once again in such a raw way,
It's rough,
dealing
man.
with the racism of our country and stuff like that. It's just, I just hate seeing it, quite frankly. But it is what it is. It's a part of our history that is represented in a lot of our mediums rather. So this is just another example, but at least it's a really strong example of how they're doing it in a different way. Now,
It definitely is, and that's where I have to interject real quick and say those who forget the past are damned to repeat it, and so that's why there is some relevance, I guess, to reminding us of stuff like this.
I don't think we need to be
hopes.
reminded about any of this at this point. I mean,
It's tough, man. I mean, but the like sheriff that they encounter and a few other characters,
we've been dealing with heavy racism in the country for the past 3-4 months at this point, and yeah, I don't think anyone needs to be reminded of it at this point. So that's just I'm fatigued by it at this point. So
yeah, I know some would argue otherwise, but
sure, I'm sure they would. It's just when it's so much, you know, when it's so much of it happening all the time, it gets frustrating and
well, of course,
everything to see,
I mean,
angering.
as if the
you know
real
what I
life
mean?
aspect isn't rough enough, and then we see it in the Umbrella Academy, we see it in something like this.
Well, yeah, I mean, anyway, it's
yeah, sorry.
It's not the point of this review. The point is that it's getting back to the acting again. It's all strong, and moving into the effects. There's a lot of really cool effects that I wasn't expecting. This was a much more creature fan friendly episode than I was anticipating it being. Like, I didn't figure we'd get to the Cthulhu from the trailer until a while, and it would just be kind of a throwaway thing, which it did still feel a little bit like, but then we get something even more towards the end with like a whole different sort of creature that I had no idea, and there might be numerous numerous of this creature. So it was just a really cool surprise for me. I don't know. What about you?
Agreed. I was. I mean, I had the feeling they were gonna, as a pilot, give us at least some sort of taste, of the full scope of the show. They were gonna show both sides of that evil, and they went more so for it than I was anticipating, especially with some of the gore associated with it. Like we saw in a couple of the trailers, what sort of otherworldly nemesis they were going to encounter, but we didn't know what sort of damage they would inflict and how crazy it could potentially become. And some of the vile get their just desserts, so to speak, and rightfully so, obviously. So that was very satisfying. And yeah, I mean, it's lots of CGI, obviously, but nonetheless, the gore factor was good. It was often shown in enough shadow where I couldn't be super judgmental. And Robert would have been good to have on this because he's read so much more Lovecraft than me. I haven't really read any Lovecraft, so I can't really comment one way or the other in that regard. But the design of the creatures that we get in this episode, even if it takes a minute, was pretty damn cool, man.
Yeah.
I gotta say.
Definitely. And the gore that we get, luckily it's an HBO show because
they go for it.
It was surprising how much of it that we actually got. So I'm excited for that aspect of it for sure. And just to clarify here at the end, the part that I'm saying is fatiguing is not like, oh God, do we have to see racism again? It's just that it's fatiguing seeing, the black culture being beaten down again and again, both in real life and in our, our actual pop culture. And it gets fatiguing, like having to witness it over and over again. It just feels so bad that it continues to happen even to this day. So that's the kind of fatiguing I'm talking about. So I just wanted to clarify that. Okay.
As you should, man. But I mean, once again, the fact that history just keeps seemingly not learning from the past mistakes, and it's heartbreaking, dude. It really genuinely is, and why we should be back at this particular point. Anyway.
Nonetheless, the show is great.
The show is really
just
terrific.
Makes it weighs on you.
Incredibly,
it can weigh on you.
It does, especially when that like people that look like me are the predominant perpetrators of this sort of shit. So, music though, one thing I have to say, and this was another problem, we haven't reviewed it yet, but I had it with Umbrella Academy. When we have modern sounding music with period specific stuff, it kind of rubs me the wrong way. It's not often, because when they're doing, especially the music performance, it's a great sequence early on in the show. But I mean, when you have the modern sounding stuff, and same with Umbrella, where they're like, oh, there's a Billie Eilish song in the 60s. It's a cover, obviously, but that stuff, it takes me out of it a little bit. Primarily, though, I especially this, the kind of maybe love interest for our main character, she sounded terrific when her and her sister were singing, and that was one of my favorite sequences of because that's, man, when I took a pre-1950s music class, man, and I know you're gonna smirking at me a little bit, but I knew nothing about anything beyond like 50s onward, rock and popular music, and just tracing it back with blues and soul and stuff like that. I mean, we're talking post-Civil War ragtime and stuff like that, and just realizing how impactful that sort of musical movement was on everybody across the world. It's I love hearing this sort of music. It's one of my favorite eras, and bring on more of it. I can't wait. So,
all right,
it's damn good.
So if you guys watched the first episode of Lovecraft Country, why don't you let us know in the comments down below what you thought of it? Did you enjoy it? Were you surprised by the amount of craziness that we got towards the end of it just for episode 1? Are you thinking that we can maintain that level, or is it not going to be able to stay at that level through the rest of the season? Let us know all of your thoughts in those comments down below. While you're down there, click the like button and subscribe if you want to make sure you don't miss other reviews going forward. We have a lot of content coming at you in the very near future.
So much.
Until next time, though, I appreciate you guys. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Cecil Laird.
Grande gracias. I've been Jaime and Fuego.
And remember, stay scared.